When you're on pilgrimage, when you're traveling, the nomadic people of the world, they know something that we don't. They don't have the luxury of collecting a bunch of useless stuff. If you've ever done any long distance hiking or long distance traveling or pilgrimage, you know every single ounce counts. You look at soldiers who are out in the field and traveling. They have to be very, very careful. Father Capon himself, very careful, very particular about the things that they bring with them. You have to reduce and recognize, if I'm carrying this on my back and not in the back of an F-150, I've got to make it count.
One of the things that struck me about the pilgrimages that I've been on is this sense of detachment. So you leave behind your life, you leave behind people that you know most of the time, you don't take your phone, you are able to fully enter into this experience. We're so cognizant of each and every gift that the Lord is trying to give us. You wonder, why don't I see the Lord working like this when I'm back at home in my normal day-to-day life?
I spent years in youth ministry and on camps and on retreats and mission trips and things. And there was always someone who would say, I dread going back to the real world. Like, this is a place where everybody loves each other, everything's encouraged, and I remember halfway through that experience, someone said, well, why can't this be the real world? Like, is it possible that God designed us to not be as busy as we are, to not be as focused on things that don't matter as much as we think they do, but to be focused on each other and on Him?
The idea of recognizing that we are a pilgrim people, we are traveling and on a journey, is extremely important to weigh what's valuable, what matters.
The real world is what we've been on for those 4 days.
But as long as we cling to the things of this world, then there's no way that we can really let go. And that's one of the aspects of the surrender, to be able to follow Jesus. And so surrender is a very important part of the pilgrimage journey. It's not just walking, it's knowing, who do we follow? And Jesus says, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
We have such an abundance, an overabundance, that we don't even know about it. We don't even recognize or realize how much we really have. And so for somebody, simplicity, maybe that means getting rid of the second car or the third car. And so the idea of simplicity, of intentionally, deliberately giving something up that you could have and have more of, it strikes us as strange. It strikes us as something that is not part of what we think about in terms of what the American dream is, with the big house and the white picket fence.
But I think to be a man, we're taught that our life is about conquest. I believe that our life is about adventure. I believe John Paul, the Great, said, life with Christ is a wonderful adventure. And we celebrate conquest, and we almost avoid adventure and act like it's not real, or it's unrealistic or not a good thing. And I know that I lived into conquest.
That carrot that gets dangled out in front of you, to me, it became an unattainable goal. I never was going to be satisfied with whatever came my way. I was always going to want more. And if you believe that the pie can always get larger, then you're always going to try to get your larger piece of the larger pie. For me, it became sort of that metaphorical feeding the beast. And it was taking over. And yet, I continued to chase that beast. The acceptance of chasing the beast was getting in the way of other rewards that I naturally was receiving from God.
St. Ignatius of Loyola, he's one of my personal heroes. And he talks about, like, in times of desolation, we tend to be drawn to low and earthly things. And it's funny, for me as a priest, one of my first indications that I'm in desolation is I'll catch myself just scrolling online, seeing what's on sale, looking for outdoor stuff, fishing stuff, and I'll catch myself 20 minutes later, after looking online through these sales things, and I'll wake up and realize, what am I doing? I've just spent 20 minutes looking at stuff. I have no real intention of buying it. And that's the first kind of telltale sign that wakes me up to say, hey, maybe I should refocus and reorient back to our Lord. I don't even understand or realize half the time that that's what's going on until I kind of have that wake up, snap out of it moment. And then, but the good news is, once I recognize it, that helps me to counteract it and start working against that tendency.
When I finally made the decision to leave my job in the corporate world, I had received a phone call from the Marriott Corporation congratulating me for spending my 60th hotel night in a Marriott hotel that year. And I hung up the phone. I got to thinking, 60 days, that's 2 months of my life that I just spent away from home, traveling, chasing the beast. When I came to the realization and recognition that that simplicity was where I was going to find true happiness, that's what then allowed me to accept the possibility of leaving what was a very fine career and starting a new one in a completely different setting.
There's something about relying on the Lord, on clearing away clutter that allows you to hear, to see, to pursue the Lord in a way that you wouldn't be able to with the distractions of other things that are flashing and catching your attention. There's a freedom that comes with not being tied down and attached to so many things.
Now that I look back and see the peace and the serenity that I have in recognizing that I am able to take the talents that God has given to me and I am able to put them in service of God and neighbor through the high school, as opposed to put those talents in service of what I call the beast, of trying to get more, get a larger piece of that larger pie. The peace that it brings me now is unbelievable.
The Eye of the Needle is a door in the gateway of the city of Jerusalem, and camels were loaded down. They were pack animals, and the merchants would have them loaded down with all kinds of bags and packages and so on. In order to get through the Eye of the Needle, you had to strip everything off the camel and walk the camel through on its own. It wouldn't fit otherwise. What is our Lord saying? It's easier for the camel to fit through the Eye of the Needle than for the rich man to enter heaven. It's about detachment. It's about what is essential. Ultimately, it's love. Anything else is superficial. And if we love our stuff more than our brothers and sisters, our family, and our Lord, then we've lost our way.
Certainly, Father Capon lived a simplistic lifestyle, there is no doubt. But one of the images that I carry with me at all times is the image of a field pyx, a small container that Father Capon used to bring the Blessed Sacrament to the soldiers on the battlefield. From foxhole to foxhole, he would distribute the Blessed Sacrament using a small field pyx, an unadorned, nothing very fancy, nothing very ornate, but it carried the body of Jesus Christ every single day in the battlefield. And that pyx we are very blessed to have on display in our school every single day. So I get to see it every day. And it reminds me of how the great glory of God can come from the most simple of tools.
I think what you recognize or what you see in the stories of Father Capon is the manifestation of a heart that's detached, of a heart that has learned from an early age what actually matters, what's the most important. And when push comes to shove, it's the people we're around, it's relationships, and it's our faith in God, our growing in our relationship with God.
I read recently that simplicity is difficult to comprehend. And I sat back and I thought about it, and I kept thinking, what does that even mean? And I realized that as a missionary, our family lived as full-time missionaries for a couple of years, and we sold and gave away most of the possessions that we had. And what ends up happening is when you remove all of the noise from around you, you're kind of forced to be with the people around you and ultimately with our Lord. And I really think that's what happens on this pilgrimage. As we walked on this walk, slowly but surely we became less addicted to the things around us, less addicted to our phones or to the noise of the world or to media or to all the things happening, and we were able to singularly focus our attention on the Lord. And I think there's some value in that. When we talk about simplicity, we're not necessarily all of us called to give up or sell everything we have, but it's an inward disposition. It's a place where I'm not attached to the things around me. I'm only attached to the Lord. And from that attachment, I may have things or I may not. That's not super important as part of the pilgrimage, but it's will I at least put myself in a place where the Lord can work inside of me, and that simplicity in and of itself is enough. You know, we're always looking for these huge things and these big ideas, but what if it's just that? And then the other part I think a lot about is at the very end of our lives, we don't take anything with us. We're yet again at that place where we're completely detached from things of the world. And really a lot of us, I've been there several times, a lot of folks as they're going to go meet our Lord realize that that was all that mattered. And their last words are often things like, I should have, could have, would have. So this week, what we're going to ask you to do is on the walk that's already kind of becoming a habit for you. I'm going to ask you to intentionally detach yourself from the things around you. Maybe leave your cell phone behind. Maybe try to find a quieter place in your community to walk and to listen and to really ask yourself, do I need all the things around me? Do I need all the noise around me? And what you'll find is that the Lord is enough. And in that, the Lord looks at you and says that you're enough. And all of a sudden, this inward disposition of detachment becomes the real focal point of your journey or your pilgrimage.